Good afternoon, everyone. So this is another delayed Q&A and an update on where we're at with the whole GGR right now. So this will become a regular thing. I try and do it on the weekends, but again, this weekend was a bit confusing, but nonetheless, it will be regular. And just to go through a couple of things, interesting listening to the comments on Elliot and the repairs to his bowsprit. Now, in some ways, GGR is in a no-win situation with this, because if we were just to say, oh, that's not as good as it was when it was built or whatever, and you can't carry on, and we do have the right to do that, we can, stop them from continuing the race, there'd be an outcry, people would say, oh, da-da-da-da-da. And if we have a good, close assessment of what's going on and accept the fact that it may not be as good as it was originally designed to be, even though in some ways we think it's even better than what was original, if we let him go, then we're in a no-win situation there as well, because there will always be the counter-argument that, oh, you shouldn't have let him go, what happens if this happens and what happens if that happens. So the reality is we had a very close look at what he did. A few people looked at it, some with quite a bit of experience, and we all came to the similar conclusion that it's not unsafe. In other words, Elliot knows that it's a repaired bowsprit, and he will manage the boat accordingly. He's not pushing the boat hard. Even if the bowsprit was completely fail again, if he just jury-rigged it again and didn't use the outer forestay and just used his staysail and a reefed mainsail, that would be perfectly secure, because it doesn't really have an impact on the integrity of the main mast, because once it's strapped down with the runners and the inner forestay and spare halyards and bits and pieces, then it's quite solid. So we consider it to be not unsafe to continue. That's the big issue, and the GGR is always about being sensible in terms of seamanship and the way you approach it, your planning, preparation, execution. And there was no way that it tipped the scale for me personally and others that I discussed it with in being a case of, no, we can't let him go forward. So he is, and I'm certain that he'll do a good job of it. I can't determine what the outcome will be, because the GGR is an adventure and every situation has an unknown outcome. It's the same with Simon, same with Kirsten, Avalish, it doesn't matter, anything can happen to them as well. So I was quite happy with the analysis and the approach that we took, and quite happy to stand by that. We had a question. People would like to know a bit of an update on what happened to what's happening to our retired entrants at the moment. So going down the list, Edward is happily back in Nova Scotia in Canada to look after his business and be with the family and stuff. It wasn't right for him, and he's very confident of the decision that he made. His boat's still here in Les Sables d'Olonne. He'll come back in April or thereabouts and look to sail at home again, and he's basically already entered the 2026 GGR. Guy Deboer was the next one out. He's moving ahead in leaps and bounds with his repairs on Spirit, and he did lose his Facebook account for a while, but he's back on track to the original account. He got his passwords back, and so you'll find him on Facebook as well, and doing a very solid repair. He's got looks like he's got another guy there giving him a hand, and it's ongoing, but there's no questions. By the time Spirit's back sailing again, she'll be pretty solid, and we'll wait and see what happens. He's sort of expressing an interest in 26, hasn't entered yet, but who knows? That's still 4 years off, or not quite anyway. Captain Coconut having a ball. He's been back home. He's been travelling Europe to meet up with family and friends and so on. Back in Australia, and he's rejoining the boat, and he's going to have a leisurely cruise back across the Atlantic into the Caribbean, Panama, across the Pacific, and head home. Pat, I think some of you know, is sailing north with Ayrton's boat at the moment, just giving Ayrton a hand to get it up to the Canaries, and then once he's done that, he'll return to Cape Town and pick up Green Rebel and sail that back to Ireland. And Ayrton will later on head down to the Canaries, have a bit of fun there with the boat, and then sail that back up to Europe again. Damien pretty much left the boat within a couple of days and came back here to France, so I haven't spoken to him since he's been here, and I know he's keen to find another project and so on and carry on with his life. However, he will return to Cape Town in January to pick up the boat and sail it back to Europe. Tapio, well, he's still enjoying the Indian cuisine on the boat, and we're about to issue a press release hopefully tonight. I've just finished writing it. Seb's doing the translations and bits, and Seb's had an input there as well. So we've got some information there which is quite cool, and you'll see that tonight, and if you're subscribing to the newsletter you'll get it. It includes the time compensation for Kirsten and Elliots. I won't tell you what it is now, it's in the press release, but I will tell you a bit of the process that we went through to come up with what we determine is a GGR time compensation. Now it's probably vastly different than what you do in the Vendée Globe, because I remember when Kevin Escoffier was rescued and stuff, they did a time compensation for everyone involved. At the time I looked at it and thought, jeepers, that's a bit tight, but they're Grand Prix type racing, and every minute of a compensation has to be justified and worked out and calculated by whatever way. I think we took a little different approach to that, and the first one is that there are 3 issues for our time compensation. Number one is that it's time off the course. In other words, if you look at Kirsten, once she got the message, she was sort of heading, I'll do it in your direction, she was heading sort of, I've got to think that way, well anyway, I'll forget it. She was heading on course out to the east, okay, heading across the Southern Ocean, and she immediately altered course to a northeasterly direction that then became northeast, and so she's given up on her course. She was going out this way, and then all of a sudden she's going north. So that whole 24-hour period, she wasn't making any forward progress to her destination. That's basically sort of what happens. That's the first bit. The next thing that happens is she's out of position from the point at which she started to the point at which she's finished. She's actually gone nearly 100 miles further north. Now you don't want to be north if you're headed towards Hobart. You need to get back down there, so it's going to take time to get down. She wouldn't go directly 24 hours down, so we don't have to give a 24-hour compensation to reposition, but there is definitely a requirement to get into a strategic position. And so we allow, because she'll cut down on an angle like this rather than going down and across. So we allow a time compensation to get her back in a strategic position. And then there's also the issue of weather, how the weather forecast changes. In other words, we looked at the weather when she stopped racing and headed north in relation to the type of weather she was going to experience once she starts to get back down. Because it could be an advantage to be later, or it could be a disadvantage, and we make our own value judgment on that. And so those 3 parameters, time off the course, changes in weather, and your geographic position when you come back on to racing once she was higher north. And we come up with a figure, and that worked the same principle for Elliots as well as Kirsten. And some people, it'll be interesting to see the comments. I'm sure there'll be more than a few comments on that. But anyway, we, Seb and I took some time. We did it independently first. I came up with my answers. Seb came up with his completely independently. Then we put them together and had a big discussion and just looked at all the bits and pieces. And I'm quite happy with the final result. Another thing that popped up, the basically we've got a no-go zone in the Southern Ocean. Now that zone is established in consultation with the rescue coordination centres around the world, or in the Southern Ocean, which is Australia and New Zealand, and all those that are affected by our fleet heading across the Southern Ocean. They request and suggest, they don't demand, but they request and suggest that if you can keep it up higher, it helps them, and we agree. And so that's partly the reason there. It's not just an ice limit because we're there in summer and so on, but it is there for safety reasons. So anyway, when an entrant gets to within 60 nautical miles of the no-go zone, we sometimes, without obligation, will notify them of that fact, that they're 60 miles north of the no-go zone. It's never been brought up in any of the briefings. It's not in the sailing instructions or anything like that. And the conditions under which we make a decision to tell an entrant or not is twofold. The first one is that if we're following, because we follow the weather very closely, we work out when they've got cloud cover, when they haven't. So if they've been under clouds for 3 or 4 days, it's assumed they may not know their exact position. And so we can then see them as they're coming close. We said, we don't want any problems in the future with them crossing over, because it's a severe penalty if they get in there. So we might decide to tell them, so you're now 60 miles north of the no-go zone. If we see an entrant that's doing a tactical manoeuvre to come down and squeak down to get some good winds or something, we may take a different approach because they're not being conservative, and it's treated as if it's like a coastline or a bunch of rocks. And so we take a different approach, especially if we know for a fact that they've got sunshine and they should have a good idea of where they are, with their celestial navigation and so on. So it's not an arbitrary thing. It's not a hard and fast thing. There's no obligation for us to do that. but we can if we decide to. And we did just recently tell Captain Goog that he was 60 miles north, and another occasion we may or may not. It's different with the weather. I think you've already understand that. Once forecast winds are over 35 knots, gusting higher, then we usually give them a weather warning. And in fact, it was interesting today in Simon Kerwin's phone conversation, on the SoundCloud, which is there for all to hear right now. I asked him about the weather that he experienced a couple of days ago, or 48 hours ago, because he was concerned that it might have been building, and we were very clear on the fact that it wasn't on our upper limits, and the weather that he described he actually got was in line with the actual forecast from Windy. There's nearly perfectly exactly the same, which was good to hear. So we didn't give him a weather warning on that one, and he understood why, because he saw when it swung to the southwest it wasn't extreme and so on. So anyway, the other thing that I realised, you'll see in the press release tonight some information about Tapio and I having a discussion about the wrap up from his recovery from the life raft and so on. Many people don't understand all the equipment that we have in the GGR panic bag, all the different items and what they actually do. So what I'm going to do sometime soon, I will get all of the equipment together that's in our grab bag, and I'll do a live going through all of the items that all the entrants have to have, and why they're there and how it all works, how it comes together. Well, not everything, but the important things, the ones that I know people will be interested in. Because it was interesting in the conversations, he had no glasses, you may remember. He didn't have his glasses, and we thought that strange because he said he had his grab bag. That was during the emergency, and everyone was saying, oh, why hasn't he got glasses in his grab bag? Well, that's stupid. Well, they actually have to have spare glasses in their grab bag, which Tapio did. But of course, he didn't get his grab bag, he got his comms grab bag. And I'll explain this later as well, but all of the communications gear, like for emergencies, the spare satellite phone, the spare YB3, the other VHF and things like that, we leave them in a separate bag that's not sealed, so they can keep recharging the batteries on the equipment to make sure they're fresh if they abandon ship. Of course, Tapio gets in the life raft, pulls out his spare satellite phone, which broke the antenna anyway, it didn't matter, but the battery was flat as well, he forgot to charge it up. So anyway, we'll go through all that as a separate live, because it'll probably take half an hour or more to go through everything that's in the bag. So look forward to that. Okay, another comment, a lot of common comments, was about the life raft positioning, and I saw some people saying, that's really bad because some of the entrants don't do what we're required in the safety inspection, and how do they pass the safety inspection if the life raft's not mounted in the cockpit or on the aft deck, because Elliot has his on the cabin top, and many of the others put their life raft down below. And the reality is that I take a very personal approach to the situation with the GGR. It is not like the normal ocean racing situation. There ain't many ocean races where you sail around the world for 8 months. Okay, that's the first thing. Most of the regulations in world sailing, special regulations and traditional yacht racing, they'll have set requirements, and you got to stick with it, right? But you got to remember that a solo sailor on his own boat sailing around the world for 10 months has to take some form of responsibility for his own safety and the way he wants to do things. So yes, they have to have a life raft, and yes, we say it's got to be mounted in the cockpit and or in the aft deck, and we advise them it shouldn't be on the cabin top for various reasons and so on. But there's no way that I'm going to say to an entrant whose life depends on it that we want the life raft in the cockpit, and the entrant says, that's not safe enough for me, that's going to get washed over the side, it's dangerous, I want to put the life raft down below. That's his choice, his risk, okay? But it's a value judgment based on his own interpretation of his own life and his own understanding of the ocean and all the rest of it. So there are some aspects to safety equipment on the boat that we leave up to the entrant. Like they have to have a life jacket, safety harness combination with hood, crutch strap, PLB, dive markers, rocket flares, the whole shooting match. But we don't insist they wear it. That's the bottom line. We say very clearly that you've got to have that gear, but it's now up to you whether you want to wear it and so on. So that's why in Tapio's case, his life raft was in a very good position. It was in a special slot in the cockpit where the boat cockpit had been modified. So it's on its side directly under the tiller. All he's got to do is lift the tiller up, grab it and chuck it, which he did. And you'll see in the press release tonight, when he launched it, inflated it, he disconnected the line that secures it to the boat and did a slip knot with it, reattached so he could get rid of it easy once he's about to get on. Turns around, makes a decision that's too hard to get his main grab bags and bits and pieces, and when he looks back, the slip knot had gone and the life raft's now a couple of metres away from the boat, drifting away. So he had to make a quick decision, grab bits and jump for the life raft, which was 3 metres away by that stage, and get into it, because you couldn't afford to lose the life raft, otherwise he would have been in real trouble. And he got into the raft and he didn't have a lot of stuff, but anyway, that's have a look at that, and there will be a full report. I've had a big discussion with Tapio. When he gets back, he's going to look very closely at the issue of what he thinks caused the boat to sink, and no one will know exactly, but there'll be a couple of ideas. I've been smiling and looking at everyone's suggestions on why they believe the boat sunk, and it's all conjecture, and some of it's quite funny and some of it's quite interesting. But let's wait and see when we have a chance to get the facts. And on the issue of, we'll publicise Tapio's findings on the issue of why the boat sank, and also we will do our own follow-up report on the issue of the equipment and the GGR regulations. And there's no question that Tapio fully concedes the fact that all of the GGR requirements were very valuable, and a couple of them potentially could have and would have saved his life if other things hadn't gone so well with the rescue. So it was a textbook rescue from everyone that was involved, and it was really good to see. So anyway, bowsprit. So another one that's come up is there was a report that Tapio left his survival suit with Kirsten because Kirsten didn't have one. This was a gesture, a gift. As you may know, Tapio got into Kirsten's boat from the life raft, and they had a quick rum and had a quick chat and a big hug, no doubt. And then as they're departing to do the transfer to the ship, and which is a whole different procedure where he gets back in the life raft, Tapio left his dry suit, not his, there's a story here, it was a dry suit. First of all, Kirsten had her own GGR approved survival suit, which is a mobility suit, so you can wear it and get things done. And in particular, Tapio had a very impressive, sophisticated dry suit, which could be worn as a bit of wet weather gear, but it was fully approved as a full survival suit as well. Very incredibly expensive, a really cool one. And he gave it to Kirsten, so she absolutely did have her own survival suit, just to clear that up. Okay, so now we can get on to the question and answers. Jane, do you want to check the camera, make sure I'm still recording? Just check the back, make sure it's still going, because we keep losing them so much. I just want to make sure we're still going. Yep, it's still going. Thank you. Okay, so now for the questions. So Dawn McKinley, Jeff Bacon. Is Tapio's life raft emergency tracker on the ship that picked... Hang on, am I on the right post here? Yes, and someone's answered something, I think. Is Tapio's life raft emergency YB3 tracker on the ship that picked him up after Kirsten picked him up? The captain of the ship has allowed this tracker to be left operational. That's someone just making a comment. Yeah, Tapio did take his YB3 tracker on the ship and was detecting a bit, and we left it up just for fun on the GGR website tracker, the 24-hour tracker, so you could actually see the ship going for a while, but we've shut it down now. Okay. There's another one, double. It's not a funny question. Anyway, velocity made good. The mean speed. Oh, someone's answering all the questions already. That's why Jeff Beacon. I'm reading the answers. So he's come on and decided to answer all the questions for us. Okay. Now I don't know what the question is, so it's probably, I'm going to forget about that for now. Completely confusing, because basically velocity made good can be vector made good or velocity made good, which is VMG, and it's anyway, I'll come up with a question answer. So thanks, Jeff, or whoever was answering those questions. Keep up the good work. That's not a question. Thanks. Okay, do all the sailors in the GGR have to carry a survival suit? Absolutely, and not just an ordinary survival suit. It goes beyond that, because when you're a solo sailor, you don't have the option of just using an evacuation type survival suit, which is a lot cheaper. It's got big mittens here and funny boots, and you can't do anything with your hands. It's really just to don and get into a lifeboat or jump over the side into freezing water. Solo sailor needs a mobility type survivor suit where they can actually untie a shackle or steer the boat or tie ropes and manoeuvre, because they'll have to do funny things to help rescue themselves, and so they're special suits that we individually approve them all to make sure they can do certain things in them. That was from Gorse. Philippe Lamoni, how do the skippers know where is the TSS, where the TSS? What's TSS? That's a trick. I should have done some research. Were there TSS in 1968? I've got no idea what you're referring to there, Philip. Oh, sorry about that. I should have read these before, but sometimes it's easier for me to answer the questions without seeing them. Maybe send us another note later. Teamwork in this race is unbelievable. Captains, followers, loving it. Hooray. I'll get to a question in a minute. Thanks, Deborah. Okay. The RNL advocates the use of life jackets whenever on the water, but the GGR crew never seem to wear them in the ribs, even at night. Why not? Surely everyone's safety is paramount. Yes, it is. The GGR is indeed a great race. I followed the original and blah, blah. Yeah, it's a valid question, and it's come up before now. But again, all I'll say is this, that there's life jackets on all the boats. We know where they are. We do a safety briefing on the boat before we leave to make sure everyone's aware of that. And we do our own risk assessment at the time. The rib in Cape Town is extremely big one, 8.5 metres or something, twin outboards and bits and pieces. And it's relatively low risk, so it was just a personal value judgment. Yeah, that's the easiest way to answer that at the time. And certainly everyone should wear a life jacket if that's the way you feel, or if the captain of the boat wants you to wear a life jacket, then you follow his instructions, and it's very important. But as I say, our own value judgments. Next one. From Dawn, why does Tapio Asturias still seem to be sailing on the tracker 10 knots? And you got the answer from that because we left it up there. Glenn Tan, hi Don and team. The entrants now allowed electronic time. As entrants are not allowed electronic timepieces, how do you avoid them getting the time, GPS position from the sat phone, AIS and YB3? Love following the race. Okay. Basically, they've all been vetted beforehand. The YB3, which normally allows you to do lots of things, has been modified. It goes through a process of restricting Wi-Fi access, and it's blocked out by the factory effectively. We work with Yellow Brick on that. They knock out certain features, which doesn't allow the clock, doesn't allow the GPS, and all the rest of it, so they're mute. The same with the with AIS. We only have an AIS transponder on board. They have no screen that allows them to determine what the other ships are doing. So their transponder is only transmitting their own position and speed and course and sort of MMSI number. So that's programmed before the start of the race, with an iPhone, and then they leave the iPhone at home. So there's no GPS available on the AIS. The same with the models of the sat phones that we have. There is in the mode, like on the extreme units, you can go into the program and you can delete all those features, and you have a password effectively. It's like it's just a password, just a 4-figure digit. So we get their sat phones, we knock out those features on the phone, and then we use our 4-figure digit to lock it. And so unless they have our digit, they can't change it while they're at sea. So we're not worried about that at all. So there's little things, and yes, they've all got wind-up clocks, but we take a while to do all that. John Pinto, for us non-sailors, please explain what is the bowsprit and what's its important for these types of boats. Effectively, a bowsprit is the big thing sticking out the front of the boat. So you can see a normal modern racing boat. The forestay that comes down from the mast attaches to the stem of the boat, the very front. I should have a model of the boat here. So say if here's the boat and there's the mast, right? And there's a forestay, there's a wire going down here, and it's attached to the front of the boat, right? Another way you can do it is, if you've got an old traditional boat, is you stick a bowsprit out the front here, like that. I don't know whether I can hold this. There's the bowsprit sticking out the front. So you've now got a forestay that comes to the stem of the boat. This is the hull, the main structure. But then you can also have another one, if this is a taller mast, that comes right to the end of the bowsprit. And it allows you to put more sail area up, and it also affects the balance of the boat, because the sails are balanced. The main sail here and the head sails, the equal pressure, and the boat's not twisting like this and it's sailing like that. Whereas if you didn't have the bowsprit and it was out of balance, you had a big mainsail here and so on, you can affect the balance and so on. So once a boat is originally designed with a bowsprit, you need to keep it because that's the balance of the boat in relation to the mainmast. And so that big stick sticking out the front there has a bobstay, has another wire going down to the hull to stop it, lifting and to stop it pushing back to support the bowsprit. So it's a very important structure, okay? And if one component of that structure fails, then the whole lot could collapse. And if that happened, the wire from the top of the mast down to the end of the bowsprit goes loose, and if you're not careful, it can upset the balance geometry of holding that mast up, and something might break, and then all of a sudden you lose your mast. So, but in Elliott's case, he's got other options: the inner forestay to the stem, or the interstitial stay, and running backstays that balance that, and so it's important for lots of reasons. Okay, next one, John Russell. Some of the sailors are getting a good push from the currents in the Southern Ocean. Do they have any idea where these currents are? Are they in any pilot guide? Well, yes. In fact, generally speaking, most sailors that are sailing that part of the world will know all about the Agulhas current. And you can see them in our tracker updates. They're streams, and they stay relative positions. It's similar if you look at it year to year. The main streams are always roughly in that position, and they can move really fast. On our tracker, we talk about speeds of up to 3 knots, but they can go to 5 and 6 knots. I've experienced something similar down there in an eddy, that going around, all of a sudden the boat stops, but you're sailing at like 5 knots, and yet the GPS is sailing, you're doing 1.5 knots? No way. And you just hold your course, but the boat's going wherever the current sends you. So the GGR entrants have no idea where they are. It's pot luck. Someone could have told them in Cape Town where some are, with approximate coordinates and stuff as well, but there's so many of them, they're squiggled everywhere. It's a little bit of pot luck. If you're down there in modern sailing with a GPS, you would work those currents to your advantage. And the other issue is that wind against current, if you've got the current going this way and the wind going the other way, you get these seas that stand up. And when you're talking big seas, like 3 or 4 meters, you can get some very dangerous seas. So, and these seas in big storms, they can break the back of ships. It's notorious for sinking, big ships. And it was interesting when in 2018, when our rig got rolled over and dismasted. It was only 30 knots, 35 knots, 3.5 meter seas. And at the time, we didn't, I can't say for sure whether it was a wind against current thing or whatever, but you've got to be careful down there. But yeah, they're all sailing without knowing exactly where they are. And they do move around a bit, as I say, but generally in similar positions. Any news of the whereabouts of Garcia Americano, which is one of the boats from 1968, which I've got to check. Jane, remind me to check on Caruzzo's boat. I meant to do that last time, so I'll make a me. And I'll see what we can find out. Okay, Philippe, what equipment are the skippers using for photo and video? Not those from 1968, right? I'm curious, as some electronic devices for photo video have GPS, and not all, hence my question. Keep it up, love the GGR. Yeah, we there's no restrictions on the types of videos and cameras that they can use. So you've got digital or film. There's some little opportunities, advantages to using film. They can be eligible for one of the Suhaili bolts that we have from 1968 race that Sir Robin gave us. But what we do is we absolutely check the still going? Yep. Absolutely check that the GPS units they've got, or the cameras they've got, cannot see the GPS in the camera back. A lot of them, they have GPS in there, but to read the GPS, you've got to download it into a computer or something like that. It's like a historical tagged file to the images, but they've got to get approval for every camera they've got on the boat. They have to give us a full list of all the camera gear and confirm that they've checked that you can't do it, and then we can check it by model number. So there's no advantage to them getting GPS off their cameras. We even allow drones, but no one's carrying a drone, because some drones you can get without the GPS on the screen, but and they're generic ones, so it's not like an iPhone. Anyway, Hugo, what are the advantages and disadvantages of a sloop rig versus a ketch rig yacht in the Southern Ocean? A mizzen mast might not be very strong in a knockdown, as there is no forestay or backstay. On the other hand, it might be possible to inactivate the mizzen, providing better control when riding out a storm. Because of a catch, the main is further forward, so overall there is less sail area. That's exactly right. First of all, there's some real advantages to a catch rig in the Southern Ocean, as you're saying. You can get rid of the mizzen, and you're pulling from the front of the boat, which is what you want usually in the westerlies, which are not so much there today. But anyway, that's one. Secondly, is you can balance the boat even in the Atlantic legs. You can use the mizzen as putting back pressure on the boat. So if you're trying to steer the boat without a wind vane, for instance, if you have a problem, you can apply the pressure to the forward, put pressure on the bow, if this is the bow, and the bow will fall away. If you then put pressure on the mizzen, right, it's going to push the back of the boat this way and the bow forward. So with balancing sails, it's quite handy to have some sort of sail at the very back. Disadvantages are that there's more sails to handle, but that can be an advantage if you've got smaller sails. If you've got a big boat, you know, like a 50-footer, 60-footer, something like that, having a catch rig is kind of handy because it's easy to handle a few small sails than one big sail. But at the same time, that's a disadvantage too, because on a smaller boat like 36 feet, you've got all these little sails, which can be a pain. You've also got more rigging that could fail. You know, you might lose the mizzen or whatever. But when you say there's no forestay or backstay on the mizzen mast, there's different ways of rigging that. Some of them have a triadic stay going from the top of the mizzen up to the top of the main mast, but then if the main mast falls over, it'll pull the mizzen mast over. So you try to avoid that, and you can put a dolphin striker or like a strut in front of that, and you're basically rigging the boat like 4.5 spreaders to stop it, you know, falling back with the mizzen mast. And so there's different ways of rigging the mizzen. But one thing's for sure, in the Southern Ocean in a big blow, you're trying to keep the bow of the boat heading downwind. You're running down before the waves, and Captain Goog is the only catch we've got, I think. And we discussed this together. There's two things that he's done. One is to mimic Sir Robert Knox-Johnson on Suhaili and put a little sail up there that I've been talking about for years. I call it a vane sail. Right up the front, you have a flat, small triangular sail sheeted amidships, and then you want to get rid of everything you can off the mizzen. Get the mizzen strapped to the boom, get the boom off, you know, put it down, have the least resistance you can at the back of the boat to keep it running down. And Captain Goog's practiced that, and he set it all up so he can do it pretty quickly and do the same thing. So in the Atlantic legs with a mizzen, you can have a mizzen stay sail. It's like this other, you have a big genoa up the front, a lightweight, you know, asymmetric spinnaker, and then you put the mizzen stay sail in there, which is a sail that's like an asymmetric off the mizzen mast, and you can't tack or jibe the main because it tacks to the deck in front of the main. Once you're set up, you can't tack the boat. But boy, you can have a really powerful boat in reaching conditions. So, you know, there's give and take with everything. But and it certainly looks good. You know, Nuri looks very slick. Oh, I think speaking of Nuri, there's a Nuri sardines. Quick grab for Nuri. The chili ones. I hate chili, but I got to eat it when he gets around Cape Horn. Anyway, next one. We've become a fan. Barbara, become a fan of Kirsten's. Can you tell me what a zodiac sign is? I know it's a strange question. Yes, it is, but I know someone's already said that. She's a Libra. Someone else answered that. So she's in October, Libra. Quite a lady, eh? Ruth Sanders. Can you explain exactly what Elliot has done to repair his bowsprit? I've listened to his SoundCloud, and it sounds like he's used his spinnaker pole. Do you have to approve the repair before you continue? Yes, we do, and I've explained that right at the beginning. A few important things he did. If you look at some of the pictures we've already posted, he's got a metal bar off the boat somewhere, drilled a hole, and he's bolted this bar at the stem head fitting or the anchor rollers, the central fin, and then back into the back of the boat. And that's a compression post. And then he's put timber underneath it so it can't compress down. And then he's run chain. Most people haven't understood this because some people are saying, it's got to be triangulated on the outside of the stanchions, which, yes, would have done better. But he's run the chain inside, and he's threaded it through inside the tube around the front and strapped it back, okay? And you've got to remember that stainless steel tube is part of the structure, but not all of the structure. There's a whole series of timber structures there, like a platform, that's holding those tubes apart, and that forms part of the structure as well. And then he's strapped it all up, and he's done little splints and a whole series of things. And then on the top of it all, he's done the triangulation. If you look at the top of it on the last photos, because some people saw the preliminary work in progress photos and, that'll never last. But he wasn't finished. He was still working on it. Look at the last one. You'll see he's got triangulated from the centre fin going right out at an angle this way and right at an angle the other way, which is quite slick, to stop the sideways movement of that whole central stem head fitting there. So he's done quite a few different things. He's covered it from lots of angles, and there was a couple of good guys in Simonstown there who were giving him very sound advice, and they were of the similar opinion of myself that it's not bad, it's pretty good. It certainly wasn't moving. He was jumping up and down on it and doing the bits. So so we do have the right to stop any entrant from racing for whatever reason, or sailing in the GGR, if we don't think it's safe. And we are quite happy to let Elliot continue sailing. Okay, James Sutton. Is there any difference in steering performance when a hydrovane is mounted directly behind the rudder or offset to port or starboard on the transom? Normally, you would have to say that the steering performance of a hydrovane would act best if it was on the centre line, okay, and that'll always be my opinion. The issue is if it's on the centre line and the trailing edge of the rudder is really close, you're going to get some turbulence there. That's common sense. But how close is it? Because the main rudder is usually locked solid once the hydrovane starts to steer, and you can also use the main rudder as a trim tab to take up any particular helm or balance the boat and keep it powered up, because sometimes you want to power it up with a certain set of sails for certain sailing conditions, but it puts a lot of load on the rudder and the hydrovane might not be able to handle that. So normally you'd have to reduce some parts of the sails, get the boat balanced, and then the hydrovane will take over. You can cheat a bit if you're racing and you want to power it up for certain situations and use the rudder as a trim tab, and then the ship's rudder as a trim tab, and then the hydrovane can take over. So generally it's a bit of common sense, and there's so many variables in that matrix. How close is the trailing edge of the main rudder versus the leading edge of the hydrovane, and so on. But generally I'd say centerline is best. They work really well when they're offset a little bit, and in fact they're quite surprising, some of the offsets I see. Even on a catamaran, you can put a hydrovane on one hull of a catamaran, and if the catamaran's sort of reasonably balanced, it'll actually steer that as well. So quite interesting situations. Anyway, what does VMG mean on the leaderboard? Is it the average speed? No, it's vector made good. We've explained that at the beginning, or velocity made good. Vector made good means if I want to go over there, the finish line is over there, but the wind is coming this way and I've got to start tacking or whatever, I can see I might be able to tack like at 90 degrees to it or something this way. So my velocity made good towards the finish line is not very efficient, right? But if I'm heading in this direction, well, it's a lot better. So while the boat's doing 5 knots this way, I'm probably only making 3 knots towards the finish, okay, if that makes sense. So it's velocity made good is the usual term for that. Hi Don and team, what happens to the films that are given over at the gates? Captain Cook Yacht, good news to Durban, South Africa. In the case of South Africa, we brought most of them back with us, Ada and I, but we weren't there for the last ones, so they've just left by DHL or FedEx, I'm not sure. They're coming up by courier up to us here. We'll then, in fact, I think we've dumped a copy in Cape Town, just to make sure, so in case they get lost, and then when we get them here, we'll dump another copy, and then we pass it over to Fathom Films, who are doing the documentary, and they'll take their bits, and you'll see us put some of the onboard footage up. It takes time because Rob, our digital director he's based in the UK, he works with us full time, he will start editing bits and pieces and make those little film clips that we've got, so it takes a bit of time, especially when the fleet's separated so much. So you will get to see parts of that footage come up in the weeks ahead. So and we send out all their letters and stuff as well. Okay, Guy Chester, can you please compare the available weather information in 1968 versus what GGR can get? Very few WeatherFax transmissions for much of the Southern Ocean, far fewer HF voice high seas transmissions. Okay, the reality is that in the 1968 GGR, hardly any of the entrants got hardly any weather forecast, simple as that. As you know, there was only a few that got past Cape Town anyway, and basically they went around the world with virtually no weather forecasting, even though they were able to get signals back and do Morse code transmissions. Like if you look at Donald Crowhurst, he was doing Morse transmissions regularly. The level of forecasting that they would have got was very basic, because they never used to have the degree of information we get now. Okay, and basically Sir Robin went round with virtually no radio. Okay, Bernard Matessier didn't even take a radio, and the others had minor radios, VHFs. None of them had big, HF AM analog radios of the day. It just wasn't there. So you can see straight away, if you want to go in the ocean and stuff like that, you need to understand weather, you need to be able to read your barograph, you need to be able to understand where the centre of a high is based on wind direction, and see whether the barometer's gaining or increasing or decreasing. It tells you a lot of information, and it's a very interesting point, because Kirsten wrote me a couple of very nice letters of her experience, and she points out a fact that the GGR offers something quite unique. You can do all this stuff if you stop and think about it and understand the weather and understand the whole issue of navigation and all these things which we get lazy with now. Everything's on a screen, and if you start thinking about it and teach yourself into it, you can actually comprehend and do a lot of stuff. Now, that may not be like normal yacht racing and bits and pieces, but it's not as bad as what you might think. Then the reality is that I can tell you now, if we look at what Guy Deboer was doing, his Weatherfax was acting like a charm, and he was getting a very strong signal out of Europe and out of Canada and bits and pieces. And yes, there's not a lot of information down through Rio for Weatherfax. Same with Cape Town, but it'll come back online through Australia and New Zealand, and so it's a useful aid. It's voluntary. You don't have to have a Weatherfax. HF forecasts. It was interesting listening to Guy today. That was an eye-opener. If you listen to Guy's SoundCloud, he was really miffed because Cape Town is coming through loud and clear, but the whole verbalisation of the forecast was hard to understand, because apparently the operator was just blurting it out, just saying, blah, 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 assuming no one's probably listening. So that's disappointing when you hear that, because they're giving the WA weather forecast for high seas in the relevant areas, but now you've got a situation where the operator can't even understand it. Others heading to Cape Town were able to get the worded HF weather forecast all the way from Trinidad all the way across to Cape Town. Now, once you leave South Africa and head across, you'll very quickly across the Indian Ocean pick up the Australian weather forecasting, so that's okay, and that'll hold through all the way through to Cape Horn. So you can see there's quite reasonable worded world meteorological high seas weather forecasting available, but it takes a bit of work, and it's not perfect, and you've got to understand what they're saying, and you've got to be able to make your own maps and things like that. So it's really there's a difference between just getting a forecast and say, it's going to blow from the west for 25 knots to 30 knots for the next 24 hours. When you get into it, you can actually start to understand what the weather's doing when you're in the Southern Ocean, just by absorbing everything around you and knowing the basis of it. I say this so often, but the ones that are down there will understand that. And it was interesting when you listen to Simon today and his SoundCloud, he gets it big time. He's just listening to him. I didn't say anything. You can see he knows what's happening with the weather. It'd be nice to get a weather forecast, but he's in the groove now. He can tell by wind direction, wind strength, barometric pressure. You can just see, you have a listen to that, and he's got a feel for the weather. Kirsten will be exactly the same. She's got a feel for the weather. So yes, a forecast would be nice, but it's not the end of the world. They'll have a very good understanding of exactly what's happening to them and how it's going to happen, by the speed of change in the barograph and barometer. I say this time and time again, and I'm certain that, and in fact any 2026 GGR entrants that are looking at this, they should be following the weather closely now. They should replay it every year for the next 3 years before the start of the next race. If you haven't been in the Southern Ocean, it takes a while to absorb what's happening. And the weather in the Atlantic legs is more benign, more bland. It's hard to get a good forecast anyway. And when you get one, it's not going to tell you a lot because there's not a lot of different pressure gradients in the middle. A lot of it, some of it's trade winds, things like that. So I'm still saying that the GGR is perfectly safe with weather, and it's an interesting subject. But there's probably enough on that. Okay. Captain Goog seems to have incorrect numbers posted. Yes, there's glitches every now and then in the software for the leaderboard and so on, so just treat it with a pinch of salt, and it usually sorts itself out within a day or so. And we're very grateful for Yellow Brick to be able to use that tracker. We really like it. We don't have a huge amount of money to do custom software and all that sort of stuff, but they look after us as best they can. Any chance to provide English translation of the French call-ins? I'm managing the calls again now, and I try to make sure, even today with Simon, I said, hey Simon, you want to do a French on the top of that? So Simon's got a French translation, or French voice in his French language to let the French people know what's going on. And when Arnaud calls, because he can speak reasonable English as well, I will ask him to try and explain what's going on in English at the same time. It's possible to do subtitles and any translations on YouTube, and all of these go on YouTube and Facebook now. So if you can do that, it might be quite funny because the translations aren't perfect, but you might get the gist of it. And for us now to do English translations of, well, there's only one French entrant now, which is Arnaud. Why the no-go zone? I've mentioned that. It's a combination of keeping the main thing is keeping them up high if anyone needs support from the rescue coordination centres and traffic if they get into trouble. It makes their life a lot easier. Okay, John Edward, Don McIntyre, James Yu, what is your biggest challenge you are facing with GGR 22 this week? Well, I probably shouldn't tell you. Lutz is out of the office, and anyway, a couple other things, but it's all fun. We like what we're doing. I've got another volunteer sitting with us here at the moment, and we're going to be building the team again slowly later. It's quite fun, but biggest challenge now, what's the biggest challenge now? Time. We never seem to have enough time. I've been trying to do these questions for a couple of days, but we're busy and we're happy. Okay. Next one, Reinhardt, but great job on hosting the GGR again, guys. Heard a couple of comments with regard to Beanie boats, higher freeboard, interior volume, how this translates to sailing power and suitability for the Southern Ocean or not. Can you please elaborate? Wow, that's a can of worms. You know, you could get a big bathtub and stick a light pole in it and put some sails on it and it'd sail, right? There's so many different choices of designs and so on. It's a huge job to try and answer that in just a short moment. But what I'd say is, why reinvent the wheel? In my opinion, all of the boats that we've approved for the GGR to date are all wholesome, seaworthy, ocean-going boats that track reasonably well in the Southern Ocean under wind vane. Okay, and the hulls are incredibly strong, and we chose those hulls to make sure that a GGR entrant doesn't get into, one of the reasons, to ensure that the GGR entrant doesn't ever have to get into a life raft. And there you go, Tapio's in a life raft in a fantastically strong boat in beautiful weather, so things happen. But generally, you know, they're also part of what we saw as the original style of GGR boats. And you know, some people say that to have a boat like a Contessa 32 or you know, Rival 34 with a fin keel and a skeg rudder and things like that is much safer in the Southern Ocean and things like that. Who knows? You know, I've got no doubt that they're safe boats as well. But for what we're doing and here and now, I'm very happy with the choice. You don't want any extremes. That's the other thing I'd say. You know, when you mention the question about beamy boats, you don't want something that's hugely beamy. You know, like I look at even at ultra high performance. You look at a scow bow 40, and I wouldn't want to be personally in the Southern Ocean in a scow bow 40 because if it ever goes upside down, will it recover? I don't know. If a big wave comes, it'll probably push it over again. Personal choice. That's the beauty of sailing. So interior volume, you know, it's interesting because in the GGR I really like the Tradewind 35s because they're great inside. I love the flush deck and the little house and everything, but it's, you know, it's personal choice again. I kind of like the Cape George 36 because it's hooting, and I think Kirsten's got a great choice of boat. We've already got a couple entering in the next edition and some more out looking for them. So I think the resale values of Cape George 36 is going through the roof at the moment. So, you know, it's personal choice, and and so on. It's a higher freeboard, you know. Yeah, Tapio's was super low freeboard, but he survived all of the heavy weather in the 2018 GGR. You know, so there's pluses and minuses everywhere. So sorry I can't give you a better answer than that, but it'd take a long time. Gail, is the marine world made aware of the race with the hope of assistance if necessary? Is the marine world made aware of the race with the hope of assistance if necessary? It really seems that the cargo ship that helped Tapio went far and beyond that would certainly come with a financial and time cost to them. Okay, yes it did. They diverted. They were heading in this course along this way, and they had to alter course and head down this way for a day or so, and then pick him up and then head back up again that way. I've personally been involved with all sorts of situations with crisis management and rescues and so on. And I can tell you one incident that we had, which is on YouTube and all the rest of it, and written about it and heavily involved. I was expedition lead on a ship. It cost the company probably $600,000 just in compensation for. Was that right? They had to compensate all the passengers on board and so on, because we picked up a solo sailor in the Southern Ocean. It was a massive disruption and so on. But everyone involved with the company didn't bat an eyelid. There was no insurance coverage for the company on that. It's a tradition of the sea, and you know, it's a well-known situation where if a mariner gets in distress, you do whatever you decide you can do to assist. There is a legal requirement to assist to a degree, but it goes beyond that. You know, if you feel it's unsafe for you to assist in a rescue, then you have a complete legitimate argument not to assist. So you do your best endeavours, and you know, far be it from me to get into the whole conversation. It takes forever, and it's an interesting subject. Who pays for rescue and all those sorts of things. But you know, I mean, I don't, you know, that anyone involved with the ocean and the sea, if they're able to assist, they usually would. And you know, you do the best you can to try and do something, and that's the way it works. It's the bottom line. In fact, some people say about rescue insurance, there's no such thing as rescue insurance. There's certain variants that could be picked up, but you can't buy rescue insurance because all of the countries around the world that are signatories to SOLAS are basically designated an area of responsibility in the ocean, and that's their area to assist with rescue. And so a country like Australia has a big area, and the government in Australia will do the best of its ability to assist any mariner in trouble in their area. Now, you pick another smaller financial country that's not doing so well. I don't even want to mention a name, but maybe one of the smaller African countries or whatever. If someone needs assistance there, they might not get the same level of assistance, but that country will do its best of its ability to try and, you know, do what it can. So, and they can't charge. That's part of the SOLAS. It's in the agreement. No one can charge anyone for being rescued. It's not allowed under SOLAS. So therefore, if that's the case, how can an insurance company offer insurance for your rescue when no one's going to charge you for the rescue? Now, no one might be able to rescue you because it might be a poor country that doesn't have the gear, and so you're going to die. That's the way it works, you know. But yeah, you know, what's the price of humanity and how's it all work? It's very complicated. Lots of grey areas. But anyway, the important thing is to do very good risk minimisation, mitigation, and training and all the rest of it, and just work on the basis that you feel confident that you're going out there and you can look after yourself. But accidents happen. So that's a tricky one. Matt Waters, perennial question about attrition rate. Guess we all know by now that high attrition rate is part of the course for the GGR. How do you find things are going this year compared to previously? I was really surprised we lost Asteria. She was a beautiful boat, fantastic sailor. I personally was on board just a few months ago, you know, checking it out, and it's like, wow. Just the best prepared boat, all that sort of stuff, and yet accidents happen. Don't ask me why or how. We've started the race 2 months later. I think we're seeing an impact of that with the weather being a bit more benign, but strangely enough now this season it's extremely benign because of this Antarctic upper atmosphere anomaly, which is keeping the westerlies further south. So the attrition rate is born out of at the moment the psychological mind game and equipment failure, and there's human stories with that equipment failure. So that's part of what the GGR is as well. So you can look at every case, and there's an explanation there. At the moment, we haven't seen a high attrition rate because of weather, which is a good thing, touch wood. It's just the race. And we the entrance we had for this one prepared and did all their planning in the COVID year, when things were tight, and let's wait and see how it all pans out. But yes, I'm not sure how Arnaud will stack up. It looks like he won't get through Hobart Gate, and it looks like Guy's really challenged as well, so we could be down to only 7 people, touch wood, going through the gate in Hobart. So how many are going to finish in Les Sables alone? We don't know, but that's what the GGR is. It is a race of attrition. It's a mind game, and it's all about planning, preparation and execution. So but I feel comfortable with it. This is a grand adventure. There's nothing like it in the world. No matter what anyone tells you, if they talk about round the world racing, I don't care what you say, this one is quite different. It's very different. It's very exclusive, crazy, brutal, ugly, call it what you like. It's a very tough challenge. So there's one there about Goog's numbers on the tracker, not good, but they'll get better in terms of there's a glitch. Kirsten had to motor a lot to Tapio's Risco. Will she be able to take on some fuel to replace what she used? Yes and no. It'll be her choice, because generally it's a solo non-stop unsupported. In the case of rescues, some of those things are held until the rescue is over. So in that context, you'll see in the press release tonight, in fact I can tell you that, she's entitled to up to 30 litres of fuel if she wants to take it. So it'll be up to her, and from our opinion, we would maintain that if we gave her 30 litres of fuel, she would still be holding her solo non-stop unsupported status. So that'll be her choice. Last question, why is there a 30th of January deadline for reaching the Hobart? Basically, that's because you really need to be around Cape Horn by the end of March. The weather starts to get very severe and extreme at that point, and if an entrance taken 5 months to get to Hobart, which will be the end of January, they're going to need a couple of months to get to Cape Horn. So if you're not through on 31st of January, we shut it down. You go to what we call the Voyager class, I think it is, and you can't leave again until the earliest, December the 1st next year. So that's it. That's a big one. I've got no idea how long it took, and we'll leave it at that, and we'll see you again. I'll try to get this rolling every week with questions and updates generally on what's happening. Thanks a lot. See